So it has been a hot minute since I have talked about anything that's happening politically or just in the news in and around Edmonds. And that's been intentional because there's been a lot of little things that have been happening that I just kind of wanted to wait and see if they landed, if they would land at all, or if it was going to come to fruition, or what the end product was going to look like. And now enough time has passed where I've seen some of these things go to the wayside, other things are here. And I want to just briefly touch on a couple of things that is happening that you may or may not be aware of. But also, I want to say a couple of the not so quiet things out loud um, in regards to this subject matter. So, what I will say, number one, is that anger and frustration is a hell of a motivator. You know it, I know it. Anyone's probably watching this knows this on certain levels. That's why certain, groups have matriculated or occurred on social media, like Edmonds Activated or other groups like that, where, in the thick of election season or pre-election season locally, um, there's a lot of frustration and the need to get some things out and to get more transparency around certain topics and certain subject matters. And of course, post-election, some of that stuff started to die down. So that's one. The other thing is that it is very easy to critique local media, and actually, we should critique local media, but hopefully that you're doing it in a healthy way, and not in a one-sided way. But I think we know that that's not necessarily the case across the board. Um, but yeah, it's easy to make those critiques. And I've heard so many people over the years say, we need more news sources and outlets in Edmonds. Edmonds is not as big of a city as we feel like it is. Um, but nonetheless, that's where we are, right? So there are people, they're saying, oh, we need a different news source. This one is biased, based on the day. If something is being written that you like, then hey, they're great. But if you don't like it, then there's bias. And we all have done that on occasion. Um, but few times does someone actually go out and do it or create another news outlet or source, because you start to find out it's not as easy as you think it is, especially if you're trying to cover a wide range of things. Um, so that being said, I want to talk about one of the newest ones that has come to life, which is called the Edmonds Record. Um, I'm going to talk about this on a very high level. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of what it's about. Um, and I will tell you right now, it is not, at least I don't think it's set up to try to replace my Edmonds News or the Edmonds Beacon, because like I said, they serve their different populations differently and have a more robust approach and subject matter to what they're covering in and around Edmonds. The Edmonds Record, though, does seem to be focused specifically kind of around the fiscal issues around Edmonds, who's in charge, what has happened. And it is a very robust site, very, very much so. I am a reader. I like to sit and read things, but I was overwhelmed, even just seeing the amount of content that's there, but not necessarily overwhelmed in a bad way, because there's a lot of information there. But again, that being said, once you start to read through it, I think um, you might start to draw some opinions that seem to be, slanted one way or the other. And again, in this society, it's so hard to just kind of stay as neutral as possible. But again, when you have anger and frustration as your motivator, it is very hard to kind of separate those things out. So, like I said, one, there's this fiscal focus around all the things that's kind of happened in Edmonds over the past couple of years, the various votes that we've gone through. And again, some of the frustrations that have come whether the votes have passed or not. The second thing that this site does is that it does kind of do a deep dive into the members of council as well as the mayor. There's a snapshot of each of the elected officials on the Edmonds City Council and some of what their backgrounds are and links to that. There's tons of links to everything. So again, I actually do appreciate that even with all the subject matter and even the TLDRs that you see throughout this, it is not lacking for backup information, at least not in my opinion. Third is that it does give some engagement options on how you can engage with the city council and city leadership. So I did appreciate that. Um, and 4, it goes into how the site was built, kind of the history, why it came to be, and that's at the bottom of the page. So the criticisms that I do have, though, and I have shared this with several people who have come to me in the past about they're building a website or they're getting ready to share out information, what's pertinent. Um, I know who's behind the site, Lee Reeves. I've talked to him in the past. We had coffee a few months ago. I think I actually owe him a follow up on that. It's just been a busy time, but you don't necessarily see that when you go on a site. And frankly, especially these days, when I'm going to a news source or an informational source that wants to share information and get my input as a resident or just giving input and advice, I want to know who's behind it. I want to know who is the person or the group that are the contributors to this. And it was very difficult to find this information on the Edmonds Record. Again, it says, oh, we're not connected to a campaign or a PAC or anything like that. That's great, but I still want to see a name or I want to see names. Because all the great work that you might be doing and sharing and showcasing, again, it might be awesome, but if I don't know who it's coming from, if the average person can't see quickly who are the sources behind this, then it's not gonna weigh as heavily as I think you want it to. So I will advise those who are a part of the Edmonds Record. I'm assuming it's more than just Lee, but I hate that I have to assume that. So you should be very transparent on who is sourcing this content that you're sharing out to others and want them to act upon. Um, and I see that's my biggest one. Once you know that, and I get why there might be some hesitance to doing that because you want to make sure you're not being attacked or anything like that. But that is the fun catch 22 because some of us were doing that with my Edmonds News and the Beacon, right? And being super critical about some of the information that's coming down and how it's going. So you can't be, in my opinion at least, you can't be someone that does that and then try to skirt around it when you want to do the same thing and be the same kind of informational outlet. Again, that's just my opinion. But yeah, so I'll be curious to see what others think. It's the edmondsrecord.org. And yeah, let me know what you guys think.